Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Sam Johnson, and it's our pleasure to be your host tonight for this Wild Bearings webcast. Curtis Creek is in the Grandfather Ranger District of Pisgah National Forest in North Carolina. And tonight's presentation is just one of 4 to 6 webcasts Chris and I do each year featuring a different watershed from around the country. If you want to see a schedule of future programs, go to our website at www.wildbearings.com and look under the Other tab for the schedule as well as the registration links. I'm a partner in Wild Bearings LLC with Chris. I'm also the author of a first-in-class book called Fly Fishing the Blue Ridge Parkway, the North Carolina section. Like most of you that are joining us tonight, I'm a lifelong freshwater fly fisherman, fishing all across the United States, a freelance contributor to several fly fishing magazines. I make bamboo fly rods is a real passion of mine, along with Chris. And Chris and I both are members of Mojo Sportswear Company's pro staff team. And most recently, something I'm kind of excited about is also a producer and co-host of Wild Bearings Outdoors. That's a pilot series of 6 episodes, each one featuring a different watershed around the country. And these are showing only on the Country Network in Nashville, both off-air and streaming services. Well, speaking of Mojo, Chris, why don't you tell these folks a little bit about Mojo?
Yeah, Mojo is a fantastic company, Mojo Sportswear Company. On the screen, you'll see there's a 10% discount code, WB10. This is really kind of high-tech, antimicrobial, wicking fast fishing all day. And at the end of the day, you dip it into the river if you need to, squeegee that sucker out, put it on, and about 10 minutes, you're dry. It is just fantastic product. And we couldn't be happier to be part of Mojo Sportswear Company. Just a fantastic group.
We're doing a program on the Country Network called Wild Bearings Outdoors. And we pick a different kind of exotic fishing location each episode, and we do a deep dive on it, kind of like we're doing tonight, except we're on site. We're actually fishing the water. Sometimes we take a country music celebrity with us and we fish with him or her. And then we also talk a lot about the history and the lore and the culture of that area. And how did all this get started? Why are we here tonight? It's really because of this book. And anyway, this book's been out a couple of years, came out at the beginning of COVID. It's a first-in-class book, and by that, that definition is it means that it's the only book out there about fly fishing the Blue Ridge Parkway. There's articles, there's blogs, there's everything else, but no one has actually written a 300-page book about just the North Carolina section. You got to decide where you go fishing in that watershed and what bugs you fish with. Now, if you call that hot spotting, I'm sorry, we don't call it hot spotting. Yeah. But if you want to know about the watershed, which happens to be about 12 and a half square miles, 8,100 acres, that's all we're going to talk about. And so that, in our definition, that's not hot spotting. Now, to get started, the closest town you're going to be closest to is a little town called Old Fort. And the reason I'm mentioning that right now before we get into the creek is that this monument you see is at the main intersection of Old Fort. I don't know how many of you have seen that. It's the biggest arrowhead I've ever seen. That thing's about 30 feet tall. But it's to commemorate, and there's a federal plaque right there by it that commemorates General Rutherford's building of a fort just very close to that location where you're looking at right there. And he built the fort in 1776 to protect this area against the Cherokee Indians, there were a bunch of them around there at the time. The problem is that they had teamed up with the British against the colonists to keep the expansion into the mountains and beyond the mountains. So Rutherford was sent down there to get the Indians under control. And one of the things he did at this location before moving on was to build a fort. And it was there a long time, and then it became Old Fort. and now that's the name of the town. So anyway, that's a little bit about the closest town there. Now, Chris, we're going to give them, and if you want to, I'm going to minimize so they can see a little bit better. You're looking at what amounts to of about 385,000 acres. It's about a 20 by 30 mile square that amounts to, almost 400,000 acres. And we're only talking about 8,100 acres on that. And that circle that you see there is the watershed for Curtis Creek. Now, if you look running above Curtis Creek, this little yellow line here is the Blue Ridge Parkway coming up from south of Asheville through Asheville, runs right under Mount Mitchell, skims right on the top of the Curtis Creek watershed, and keeps going all the way up to Grandfather Mountain, Linville, and all the way up to Blowing Rock and then up to the Virginia line. Well, on the other side of the Blue Ridge Parkway, this is the South Toe River right here. So, and the reason I'm mentioning that is because, if you get tired of fishing Curtis Creek, all you got to do is drive up the Forest Service Road, jump over the other side of the Blue Ridge Parkway, and you're in the South Toe watershed. And then there's, of course, waters all along the Blue Ridge Parkway. You got Carter's Creek over here, just under Bernardsville. You got Swannanoa River heading up at Ridgecrest and flowing through Black Mountain. You got Mill Creek and Flat Creek coming into Black Mountain and Old Fort. So you got a lot of water around you to fish. You see Asheville's over here, southwest of this watershed. You got Black Mountain about 10 miles west southwest. Old Fort is about a mile. Marion is just to the northeast of the watershed. And then over the ridge here on the pass of Mount Mitchell, you've got Spruce Pine and Burnsville and all those little towns up there. So you're surrounded by a lot of stuff, but mostly you're surrounded by wilderness and where we're going to be going next here. So that's a general kind of overview, the big picture of where we are. Now, I want to take just a couple of minutes about the significance of this watershed. When you get on Curtis Creek, you're going to be on a very significant piece of real estate right there for a lot of reasons. And it dates back to the early Victorian age, which was, back in the late 1870s through about 1910, logging. You had a country that was growing and eating up lumber as quick as it could be produced. And logging had decimated many of the watersheds in the east, the south, and including the west. They were moving out west at that time also. And people were getting concerned because forests were being cut down, slashed down. They were burnt. What was left was burning all the time. The siltation and effluence was going down into the watersheds and destroying drinking water and the ability to navigate up and down a lot of these rivers and streams. And so people were getting really concerned, and it kind of came to a head back in 1891 when Congress passed the Forest Reserve Act. And that basically gave the president and Congress the authority to create national forest out of the public domain. In other words, land that had not been owned by anyone. The president can say, we're going to take this 100,000 acres and turn it into somewhere out west and turn it into a national forest. Well, that was great. But what it didn't do was do anything for what was going on in the eastern half of the United States. Now, keep in mind, all of this property we're talking about in the eastern part of the U.S. was already no public domain. There were no national parks. There were no national forests east of the Rockies. And they were being decimated by the the lumber companies that were coming in and cutting the property. Well, in 1897, they passed an act called the Organic Act, and that allowed the president and Congress to set aside watersheds to protect what was left of the watersheds, including existing watersheds that had been destroyed, for future timber production as well as fire protection. But there was no real funding set aside. The states didn't have a lot of say into how this would be administered. So it really, for quite a while, it floundered and nothing really happened because no one wanted to really support it because the funding wasn't there, states' rights weren't there, no one knew how to be administered. And then a senator by the name of John Weeks came along, and he wrote up a bill, a supplement bill to the Organic Act called, it finally was called the Weeks Act. And what it did, it allowed the federal government to buy cut over navigable watershed places that had been destroyed or they needed protection, as well as put in fire protection measures for the public to be able to enjoy it and have access to it. And that's what really allowed them to go out and buy property like this tract we're going to be talking about tonight, 8,100 acres. That allowed the federal government under the National Forest Service to buy that land and put it in as a national forest. Around 1914, the National Forest Service bought from Burt McDowell Lumber Company in Marion 8,100 acres, which included all of the watershed that we're going to be on tonight. The significance of this story, and it's so important, is this was the first acquisition by the National Forest Service east of the Rockies. It became the first 8,100 acres into the National Forest system, which it finally rolled into it in 1916 after all the paperwork was signed. And a month later, Edith Vanderbilt had already sold, about a year before that, 86,000 acres down around Brevard and below Asheville. And that rolled into Pisgah National Forest. Woodrow Wilson signed the paperwork to convert this into Pisgah National Forest in 1916, and immediately Curtis Creek and Pisgah Forest, about 100,000 acres worth, rolled into the National Forest immediately. And right now there's a little over 500,000 acres in Pisgah National Forest. Roughly 20% of that are just from two purchases that the Forest Service made. So that's a little bit about the history. These plaques, these signs that you will see, this is actually the same sign. The one on the top right, I believe, is from the early part of the last century. And the one on the bottom left is one I took about a month ago. And that's commemorating the Weeks Act of 1911, which made the National Forest Service in the East possible. Without that, folks, there would be no national forest or parks in the eastern half of the United States. That's a little bit about that. Now, in addition to that being one of the reasons this is an important place to go fishing, is that also in the 1930s, there was a CCC camp at where the camping is now on this creek, where you may camp and I have camped. That was a CCC camp, Civilian Conservation Corps camp. These guys built roads, bridges. They worked on cleaning up the river. They replanted. They did all kind of things to make this into a great place for us to hang out. 90 years later, or really 100 years later, is kind of where we are right now. So the CCC played a big role in Curtis Creek watershed. Something else to keep in mind when you're in the Curtis Creek watershed is that it's a bear sanctuary. And by that, there's a large populations of bears. I've seen bear in there. I've never had a problem with a bear, but I do know that when you're camping there, it becomes extra important to keep your food in a trapeze, keep it off the ground, suspended, or you're probably going to have a visitor sometime during the night, and you probably don't want that. Now, let's talk about Curtis Creek. That's what y'all really want to hear about, so that's what we're going to talk about now. As in the book, Fly Fishing the Blue Ridge Parkway, this is really just a page out of the book. On every watershed, you've got these same metrics that we cover. Out of 5 thumbs up, I rank this a 4 thumbs up for a lot of reasons. Number one, there's a lot of fish in here. There's wild fish. There's delayed harvest fish. There's history. Access is extremely easy, and pressure is really not that bad. So I rank it a 4 thumbs up. Its source is at about 4,000 feet, right under the Blue Ridge Parkway, about a half a mile under the Blue Ridge Parkway, straight north of it. And where it goes under Highway 70, and I'll show you this, it's at about 1,350 feet. So it's high enough that you get some brook trout activity in there, and it's flat enough at the bottom that it's pretty easy to navigate. At the mouth where it goes into the Catawba River, about a half a mile below Highway 70, it's still pretty small, about 30 feet across, 25 to 30 feet across. It's not a big creek, and only a foot or two deep in most of the places. It's got about 8, only 2 that I think are really significant, in my opinion. Some of you, I know, are going to take issue with that. Some of these may be, Hickory Branch may be your favorite, tributary. And I've caught fish on it too. It's just that I didn't write about it because I think it's really small, but it does have fish in there. But Deep Branch is the first one that I consider to be a reasonable tributary that you'll come to. I'll show you that. Newberry Creek is the largest by far and most fishable, really known as a brook trout habitat, especially the upper reaches of it. Slick Falls, Hickory Branch, Long Branch are all small tributaries. Hickory and Long come in there at the campsite just feet apart. I mean, literally 50 feet apart is where they go into Curtis Creek. And then Big Camp Rock Branch is the next larger branch that I fish and that I think is worthy of talking about tonight in a little more depth. Lick Log and Bear Drive are 2 of the higher ones. They're not that large. They are fishable, and I've caught fish in them. But I'm going to spend more time telling you about Newberry and Big Camp Rock. The gradient on average is about 5.7, which is very moderate. The vast majority of it, except the headwaters, and I'll show you that later. Over 8.8 miles, it drops about 2,600 feet. Effort is moderate to difficult, depending on as you get closer to the source up there. As you'll see, it jumps up to almost an 18% gradient, and that'll kick your butt. From 5% to 18% is a huge difference. The effort, moderate to difficult. Pressure is slight to moderate. If you're down in the delayed harvest section that I'll show you, you may have a little moderate competition down there, but as you move upstream from there, especially away from the campsites, more often than not, Chris, we don't see anyone. Fishing quality is good. You got all 3 of the salmonoids there. You got bows, browns, and brookies. Brookies certainly in the higher elevations. Access, you can kind of read that. I'm not going to go into that, but for the most part, you've got a road paralleling the creek all the way up, except the last 1.5 miles right below the parkway. To get to the mouth, it's easy to get to from Old Fort. You just get on Highway 70, go 2 miles east, you cross the bridge, you're there. From the source, which is at Big Laurel Gap on about milepost 347.5 on the Blue Ridge Parkway. Just turn south on Forest Service Road 482, and then follow it down to the creek, which is on the road 3.1 miles, but you're only 1.5 miles of stream facing there. So it's easy to get to. That's a little bit about the creek when it just comes to the statistics of the creek. Here's what it looks like. Now, if you, Chris, jump in here if you want. This is Highway 70 coming from Old Fort down here, going toward Marion. This is the creek as it comes down. We call the lower section comes down here, and that's about 3.9 miles, and then it picks up there at the confluence of Newberry Creek and heads north up to a last bridge that you cross here, and then it goes on up and goes to the Blue Ridge Parkway. We consider it to have three distinct sections. You got a lower section, which is, for the most part, you've got about half and half private land, half and half delayed harvest here, which is open year-round to fish. Delayed harvest rules, as you know what those are, and then a little bit of private land here. And I'm going to show you the details of that in just a minute. Really, what I call the sweet spot of Curtis Creek being what we call this midsection here. And the road literally parallels it anywhere within feet to 50 yards all the way up to the last bridge. And this is also where all of the tributaries come in, that I'm going to will show you what they look like, what the fish look like. You cross over bridges. A lot of them I've got images of the bridge there too. So that's a little kind of an overview of what this watershed looks like. Again, this is the Blue Ridge Parkway up here. And you can see that nearly all of these tributaries are sourcing within a quarter to a half mile underneath the Blue Ridge Parkway, and then flowing down and then going down. The Catawba River is just off the screen down here where Curtis Creek flows into. So that's kind of what it looks like. Let's talk about the lower section here, which is in red. That's from Highway 70 on the bottom end right here up to Newberry Creek confluence is 3.9 miles. And of that, you got about 1.9 miles is private property. The first roughly 3/4 of a mile down here on the road, there's a little pull off, and there's a signpost there that somebody steals the sign. More often than not, you will not see a sign. You'll just see a signpost. But if you'll clock it 3/4 of a mile, you'll come to that little pull off. That's the start of the Forest Service, the National Forest Service line. Then everything above that, all the way to Deep Branch, is all public land, and that's the delayed harvest section. That has some really great fish in it all year round, really, and I'll show you some of those. And then there's roughly about a mile of private land right here at the end, parallel by 1227 all the way up to this confluence right here. Is paved most of the way, and then when you get up on the private land up here, then you get into some dirt roads, which takes you all the way to the Blue Ridge Parkway. So that's kind of what. Now I'm going to start down here with some images, and I'm going to show you kind of what it looks like as you work your way up there. At Highway 70, at the start of this section, this is pulling off of Highway 70 up here. That's the signs that you'll see. Kind of can't miss it. There's the road. There's 1227 going up here. It's a great road. You can see the creeks running parallel to it right here. These are driveways going off. This first part of it is private land, the first 3/4 of a mile. Now, if you want to fish it, I suggest going and asking people if you want to fish it. I don't think it's necessary because there's enough water without, asking to get on their land. But if you want to do that, that's what I would do. This is what you get beyond and look down off the roadway. These images were taken about 6 weeks ago. The foliage was just jumping out. Everything was just Kelly green, beautiful. But you can get a feel for what this water looks like typically as it comes down Curtis Creek. It's beautiful water. The creek's about 10 yards wide, 30 feet wide right here. Really a pretty drive. There's a little rainbow that I caught. Then there's a lot of them in there, and they're all hungry. There's some of that trout porn. This image is just purely to show you the quality of water coming out of Curtis Creek. There is no development other than the campsite and a road up there. It's pretty darn well maintained, but you can see the clarity of this water. This water right over here was about probably 2 feet deep, and it's just gin clear all the way down, except after a hard rain. And even after a hard rain, it clears up pretty darn quick. This is another bend in the river right here, and you can see how pretty this is. I mean, this is just right off the road. The road, you see gravel from the road rolls off here. In this curve, it gets 2 to 3 feet deep. Some places 4 feet deep, undercut banks. You can stand over here, roll cast, swing a dry dropper rig down over across here, pull them out from underneath there, or use streamers, one of the two. A couple of other fish. This was actually one of the larger coming out of that delayed harvest. This was about a 13-inch fish, which is kind of typical of what you'll catch. This little brown trout here was probably about 8 inches in that area that we just looked at. At the very top of the delayed harvest public fishing area, there's a handicap pull-off there with a ramp for wheelchairs and other handicapped people. Deep Branch comes in maybe 30 yards past this point upstream. That is the end of the public property for about about a half a mile or so before you break out into about 1,000 feet of public land, and then you get back on private land again before breaking out into the national forest for good. But this is when you get to this point, you're at the end of the public fishing right there, and there are fish around there. Once you get past there, you'll start seeing these. Chris, we've seen a lot of these along here. There's nothing to see, 3 or 4 or 5, no trespassing, no parking, no nothing on one tree. And for about the next, 1.2 miles until you get to the confluence of Newberry Creek. And this is what it looks like. It's beautiful. I mean, it's very tempting to go fish it, and I probably will one day, but I'll have to ask permission to do it. But you can see how pretty this water is and what the substrate looks like. Very clear, very fishable place. Again, here's the road, there's the creek, you're paralleling it. When you get to the second bridge on 1227, this is the second bridge. That's about 3.9 miles up the road. Off to your left is going to be an old mill that's sitting. In fact, you can see the wheel right here. The road that turns to the left is going to go up Newberry Creek, and I'm going to show you that one in just a minute. If you continue to go straight, you're going to drive out of the private land in about a 1/4 of a mile into the national forest, and you'll stay in the national forest the rest of the time on Curtis Creek. But this is kind of an iconic spot right here. When you get to this bridge, you'll see this mill, and you can either go straight or you can turn up and go fish Newberry Creek, which is known as a brook trout stream. I'm not going to read all of this because it's pretty self-explanatory. Out of a 5 thumbs up, I really give it I vacillate between a 3 and a 4. To be a brook trout stream, its source is relatively low at about 2,485 feet. We typically think a brook trout, wanting to be over 3,000 feet, but there are a lot of brook trout in the headwaters of this stream. And there's some washdowns that you'll find down very close to the confluence in with Curtis Creek. Very small, about 15 feet across. This creek, it drops about 1,800 feet in 2.5 miles. That's about a 14% gradient, and that will wear on you rather quickly. But a lot of hand over hand climbing. The great thing about it is there's an old Forest Service road that parallels it all the way up to the confluence with its headwaters. There are 4 tributaries. You got Horse Branch, Chute Branch, Left Prong, and Laurel Log Branch at the top that I'll show you on the map. It can be a really fun stream to fish. If you like to chase brook trout, I would suggest getting on this one. It's a good stream. Here's what it looks like. Now this is the mill down here. This is the road where I said hang right, you're going to go up Curtis Creek. This is Curtis Creek Road right here. And if you turn left, you're going to be on private land for about 1.2 miles up to this point, about right here. There's probably some water's pretty along there. You could ask permission and get in there, but I tell you what, the water is just as pretty or prettier as you get above the gate up here that I'll show you in a minute. You have one tributary coming in through the private land here. You've got about a 50-foot stretch of land, private land, that you would have to navigate through or get permission technically to walk over to get on Horse Branch. It's very small. I don't know if it's worth the effort. I fished it once. I caught a couple of little small rainbows in there. Hard fishing. To me, it's really not worth the effort. But anyway, it's there. As you get up to the confluence, at several miles above, you get to where Chute Branch goes off to your left, and Left Prong comes in from your right. That is the source of Newberry Creek, is Left Prong and Chute Branch. Left Prong also has Laurel Log Branch that comes into it. I have only fished to the confluence of Left Prong and Chute. I have not fished up these 2 branches right here. There are brook trout all the way down into this section right here. It's starting to get bumping up under 3,000 feet, and you're getting into anywhere from 9 to 12% grade and into a gorge area right here. Again, this is the Blue Ridge Parkway right here. This is a fun place to fish. As you turn up the road going through the private land, the first thing you're going to see of the house, you're going to see a little dam over here with a pipe coming out of it. This was the raceway, the tail race that went down to about 100 yards below here to the mill that I showed you. That was I'm assuming that was a grist mill. I've never seen it. I've seen the wheel turning, but I've never seen what they actually did there. You're going to see houses like this, some very nice homes with huge rock walls and Adirondack fences in front. Then across from it, you might have a trailer. But for a mile, you're going to be heavily populated area right here, and this is what the water looks like flowing through there. Very fishable. I'm sure there's a lot of fish in there. I've never fished that first mile. always go up to the upper part of Newberry Creek. And as you head up above civilization, about a mile, 1.2 miles, you're going to break onto the Forest Service property. You're going to see the boundary, and you're going to see a gate. This trail will continue all the way up to the confluence, and in some manner, even beyond that on Chute Prong, you can walk it. So it's a great walk. You can walk up and then jump, or if the gate's open, you can ride it. But then you can jump down into the creek. This is what the creek looks like there. Very, very beautiful. A lot of just dozens of drop pools full of fish. There, as you get higher, closer to the confluence between Chute and Left Prong, that's what it's going to look like. Little rainbows, good sized little rainbows, like anywhere from 8 to 12 inches. Very colored. You can see the color on that fish. And then, of course, the little brook trout. The biggest brook trout I've ever caught up there hadn't been any bigger than 8 inches. But on average, they're going to be between 4 and 6 inches is what I've caught up there. So Upper Newberry Creek, that's the largest tributary coming into Curtis Creek. I highly recommend it. It's easy to fish, good access, and you get a good variety of fish on there. Now, if you come back down to that intersection where the mill is and turn left, this next section in red is the midsection of Curtis Creek. Kind of the sweet spot as far as just the normal fishing there. And it goes from Newberry Creek to the last bridge up here that you'll cross before the road goes away from Curtis Creek, which runs through what amounts to a gorge in here. And that's a 3.4 mile run. There's a lot of fishing just on Curtis Creek proper. That does not count all of the tributaries coming in that would triple or quadruple that amount of fishing footage there for you. The first half mile is private. Doesn't matter though, because once you go through the gate, then you're on national forest land for the rest of your fishing there. That start point right here for the midsection is at about 1,675 feet, and it goes up to about 2,574 feet, and only about a 5% gradient. So it is easy to fish this midsection, and it's all managed as wild trout water. You all know what that means. So this is where the campground is. Campground is about a mile in, a very special place. That's where the CCC camp was. And it is parallel by Forest Service Road 482 all the way up to the Parkway, all except the last 1.5 miles where the road and goes. But as far as the midsection, you have a road paralleling it within feet nearly all the way up. So here's what it looks like. If we start down here and start working our way up, there's that sign again about the Weeks Act. Stop and pay homage to that when you go by. That's a famous place. And you would not be there fishing it if that had not happened. The first tributary coming in on the left at about roughly 2.5 miles up, 3.5 miles up, is a little creek called Slick Falls Branch. Now, it also has a waterfall on it about 3/4 mile up. This is hard fishing through here. This is a big wide spot on Slick Falls right here. But if you're into bushwhacking and going from, waiting, 20 yards or 30 yards between drop pools that'll be holding fish, then this is a good creek to do, because it has fish. It is hard to fish though. As you come back down and get back on the 475, you're going to come to Curtis Creek Campground, and that's going to be on your left side as you approach. You can see the creek is running right here by you, the Curtis Creek, a really, really good Forest Service road here that you're going up. And as you get into the campground, you have Long Branch and you have Hickory Branch that you're going to be able to fish. Now these are very small, and you're going to bushwhack up. Hickory Branch, about roughly 3/4 of a mile up, it's got a pretty little waterfall there with a pool underneath it. We'll have some rainbows in it, but both of these are very fishable creeks. Come into the campground, they're within a rock's throw of each other as they enter Curtis Creek, and it's not often you see two creeks coming into a confluence like that from two different little watersheds that come into a major creek that close together. But anyway, if you stay in the campground, it's kind of hard not to go fish those creeks because they're right there. As you come into the campground, this is what it looks like. You got a bridge right here. Curtis Creek is coming in from the left. This is Curtis Creek as this just above the campgrounds. And this I think there's 25 or 30 campsites there, both for RVs and tents. You can make reservation for this campsite online, or you can walk up. There is a host there living there in an RV, and there are many times, especially on the off season, that you can just walk up and get a campsite. And so if you're going to fish this area, this is a great base camp to operate out of. They have bathrooms, and so it's a great place to be if you like that type of dude camping. Just above the campgrounds, as you head up, as you start getting closer to Big Camp Rock Branch, this is what the creek looks like on the left side. As you can see, it's still a pretty good sized creek, holds some really nice fish like this little 13, 14-inch little rainbow that I've got over here. It's a nice little fish. The next creek that you're going to come to that we recommend fishing other than Newberry Creek, if you're only going to fish one, you're going to want to fish Big Camp Rock Branch. This is the second large tributary coming into Curtis Creek. I rank it a 3 in the book. I kind of vacillate back and forth whether it's a 3 or 4. It depends on the time of the year. The downside is that you get into about an 18.3% gradient over 1.6 miles. It drops about 1,500 feet. That's really a misprint right there. That is not a moderate. That is extreme. Kick your butt when you start bushwhacking up 18% gradient right there.
That's
very
Sam's
small.
math. That's Sam math, right?
Yeah, that's Sam math and description there. But it sources well high enough, about 3,700 feet, for brook trout spawning, and there are brook trout in this creek. It is difficult, very difficult to fish, but it's rewarding because you're going to bushwhack up into one drop pool, you're going to catch a fish, you're going to bushwhack another 20 yards to another pool, you're going to catch another fish. And the problem is like when to stop fishing, because what you need to remember is that the higher you get, you got to turn around. There ain't but one way back down, and that's the same way you came. And it's harder for me going downhill than uphill. Bows and brookies primarily, but it's at about 5.6 miles above the confluence. There is where you're going to encounter Big Camp Rock. This is what it looks like on the downstream side of the bridge. Just past the view line here is its confluence into Curtis Creek. And it provides a lot of water to Curtis Creek. Curtis Creek almost doubles in its size as Big Rock comes into it here. This is probably 3/4 of a mile upstream from the bridge. You can see this little drop pool right here. That's typical where these brook trout hang out. You can see this is about maybe a 5-inch brook trout, not a big fish, but they're up there in good numbers. And to me, this is what you're fishing for. It's pocket water fishing. You're going from drop pool to drop pool. There are not a lot of runs or riffles or pools in this creek. What you're going to find are small drop pools, or I guess you could call this a pool, that's anywhere from 4 to 5, 6 feet across, anywhere from 6 to 12, 14 inches deep. And nearly every one of them is going to have either a brook or a rainbow trout in there. So that's, I'm a blue line kind of fishing guy. I know Chris loves blue line fishing too. And this is what we revel after here, are these kinds of streams. As you go above Big Kemp Rock, there's another little creek coming into the left called Lick Log. Now, Lick Log is 6.5 miles above the confluence, and it's a Slick Falls. It is not a big creek. It is pocket water fishing at its extreme, but there are fish in there if you so choose to bushwhack in there. And there may be times when you're 30, 40 yards between pocket water that you can fish, but you're almost assured that you're going to catch one every time you go in there. This is some of the higher area. This is a burn over that burned over a few years ago, that you can see how it's opened up as you get up into that open area up there. This was taken about 6 weeks ago, actually. This is an abnormally large pool for slick rock. Lick log. This is a large pool. You're going to have some rainbows and brook trout in there, but this is a fun place to fish. Well, as you leave Lick Log and start heading north, as you can see, the road still is a great road. The creek's off to your left, and you're going to get up to your last creek. Your last tributary is called Bear Drive Branch. I can't imagine how it got that name, other than they did bear drives up there with their dogs when the CCC was there in the early years, and they hunted bear and they used dogs to drive them. So there's a lot of bear around here, so that's how this creek somehow got its name as Bear Drive Branch. But anyway, this is what it looks like looking upstream from the bridge, going from left to right, driving uphill. This is what Bear Drive looks like. This is an image taken probably a quarter mile upstream. This is a pretty good sized little creek. I don't know how this brown trout got in there, but he's there. And so was this little rainbow. I would have thought that I would have caught brook trout in there, but I didn't catch a brook trout in this particular part of the creek. But I know that they're in there. But I was impressed that this little guy was in there. You don't expect to see brown trout, up on these kind of waters that high up. Now, as you get to the last bridge that crosses Curtis Creek at the top, is at 7 miles above Highway 70. This is where this you're looking at 1 miles below the source of Curtis Creek, and it's coming under this bridge. You're going to pass over this bridge and head off into the ridges on the Forest Service Road, not to see Curtis Creek again. And so this is the last shot right here. This is looking back at that same bridge. We were sitting on that bridge looking upstream. This is a sign that's right before the bridge, and there's several of these signs around here that, camping only in designated sites. Well, that makes sense along the area that midsection there. I don't know why every sign in there has got no fireworks. Apparently, people for a long time went in there and shot up fireworks and kept campers up and
Yeah.
and started forest fires. The thing
Right.
I don't understand is the no alcohol, and because it's rare to see signs saying no alcohol. And I can tell you this not from my personal experience, but people that I know, they have had Forest Service personnel actually come to their car and come to their campground and want to look in their coolers. I have never ever had anything like that happen. So maybe it's a word of warning or whatever, but if you do go to Curtis Creek, you may be very careful carrying alcohol with you. Even a beer might be the reason you would get a ticket. So I don't agree with that, but you know what? I'll comply with it.
So
So
Sam,
yes,
we
sir.
got a question, and the question is this: are there pull-offs in the midsection? Do you recall? Are there several pull-offs?
Yes, there are pull-offs all up and down the midsection.
Yeah.
There are plenty of places to park and either walk right down in the creek or hike up or downstream on the road and then drop in. But you shouldn't have any problem finding pull-offs. Like me, parked right here. I'm out of the road, and that's right past the last bridge right there. So you shouldn't have any problem.
You're hiding your fireworks.
Yeah, I'm hiding my fireworks. Yeah, yeah. I got a lot of bad habits. Unfortunately, that's not one of them. Uh, uh, let's talk about the upper section. Now, you notice the we've covered the lower section down here. We covered the mid section. This last section of red right here goes up to the Blue Ridge Parkway. And that's from this last bridge where I just showed you. There's 1.5 miles of stream all the way up to the source. And that source is about roughly third of a mile to a half a mile under the Blue Ridge Parkway right away. Now, if you look very closely, you can see the Forest Service Road as it breaks away here, parallels the creek for a while, and then breaks away this bridge all the way up to the Blue Ridge Parkway. There's one spot right here where it gets to within probably about 7/10 of a mile from the creek, and you can get on it. There's a Forest Service Road 974 that I mentioned down here. It's actually about 800-foot hike. It's a great road. You can hike all the way up there, and if you want to get to within about a half a mile of the source and catch a brook trout or something like that, just to say you did it, that's an easy way to do it. So that's really. I have not fished a lot along here. This is maybe a quarter mile above the last bridge. And as you continue up, this is what it starts looking like. And I've only been probably 3/4 of a mile up to that pullout that we were talking about on that hike in. But this is what the creek looks like. Very small drop pools there, or pools, whatever you want. I call that a small drop pool. And that's where you're going to catch. And the only thing I've ever caught up there are small brook trout, because you're getting really close to the 3,000-foot range there. And there's a lot of fish. There's a lot of little fish up there. Curtis Creek Falls. I'd like to take credit for taking this image. I didn't. This was taken by someone else that knows what they're doing. But this is Curtis Creek Falls. It's really pretty in the winter. I have seen it once in the winter, frozen over, and it is particularly beautiful. And in the summer, it's pretty too. Small pool at the bottom and above that you can actually catch fish in. So if you're in that area and you want a little bit of a hike, it's bushwhacking in there. There's really no good trails down in there, but once you get there, it's a really pretty area. Well, as you get 8.8 miles up from Highway 70, just east of Old Fort, you're going to break onto the Blue Ridge Parkway. And these are the views. As you can see, there's just extraordinary beauty. This was taken about, again, when I took those other images about 6 weeks ago. And this is twin tunnels to the north, going into there. Two tunnels that go once you get in there. These are rough cut tunnels, no concrete lining them. You feel like you're in a mine as you go through there. Very, very beautiful. Great part of the parkway to get on. What do you fish Curtis Creek with? And I'm going to turn it over to Chris.
Yeah, I mean, we're pretty consistent, right, Sam, on bugs, when wild trout fishing in general. We're big on confidence bugs. We're big on midges. 50% of a trout's diet is midges. And so you should always have a pretty good staple, especially when you get into some of the smaller brook trout. You're going to need some small bugs. Those are size 20s that you're seeing there. We like, as they call it on the Soho, the South Holston River, the sweet thing, which is that rusty brown zebra midge with a copper bead. And we also like these Lancer chironomids, another great kind of midge imitation, but always have, your staple of colors. I can tell you could be fishing and black's the color today, and tomorrow red is the color. As Sam knows, and anybody that follows us, I love purple. For some reason, it's that trout vision, right, Sam? So purple.
Yeah, it has long wavelengths.
All right, what do we got next?
Now, Chris, you're going to drop these under an indicator or either as a dry dropper rig, right?
Typically dry dropper. There's not going to be on these kind of waters. You're going to be dry dropping most of the time. My advice is even when the water gets the weather gets colder, you're still going to probably want to dry drop. You just don't have a whole lot of room and a lot of really deep runs that you're going to be able to put an indicator on without scaring the fish. So we're pretty big about, you'll see a Mac Daddy here in a minute. We like the Mac Daddies because they float a lot of weight under them. You can put under a Mac Daddy, you can put a size 16 soft tackle, the Stinger. That's a peekaboo. We call it a peekaboo. It's really a guide's choice kind of hare's ear soft tackle. You can see there's a gold bead in there, but you can put a lot of weight under that Mac Daddy. But always have soft tackles. Orange is probably the best surveyor that we have. That's gonna give you kind of a general all-purpose trying to find the fish.
These are deadly bugs right here.
Deadly.
They're deadly.
Deadly. Anytime you see sulfurs coming off, anything like that, we like to move over to the split cases. And of course that Frenchie, Lance Egan's Frenchie, is another great choice. I'll tell you, for the most part, we fish a lot of split cases. You can go a little bit bigger on these creeks. And of course we have that split case in a nymph style as well, in a size 20 if you need to go smaller, but 18-20 is going to do pretty good for you. Sometimes you may want to put that first, get the bugs down, use that as your point fly, and then drop a smaller bug off of it. Gives you, twice the choice there.
Yeah.
And then of course
that's a great rig too.
It is a great rig. Blue wing olive. This is kind of our version of the blue wing olive. And I will tell you, anytime you have, some overcast, a little bit of rain, been a little cooler condition, this blue wing olive is deadly. It will catch a lot of fish. You see those little bitty gray bugs coming off the water. That's going to be the time to put a blue wing olive on. Okay. Great searching pattern. Going to get you there. Okay. We can't speak enough about the Mac Daddy. This is a big T version. We changed it up just a little bit and added some New Zealand strike indicator. That's the black that you see coming off, but a really nice dry hackle, going to float a lot of weight. Obviously you gotta treat this, right? So you got to use some loon loxa. You got to use some frog's fanny. to keep it floating. But if you take care of it, it will take care of you. I don't care what anybody says. I can go and fish this bug, catch 30, 40 fish on it before it wears out. So
I tell you, you can drop a monkey wrench underneath this and it'll float it. I've never seen anything pop out of a rapids or a riffle better than those Mac Daddies.
yeah, we would rather use this, increase our odds of catching a fish. Number one, these catch a lot of fish, especially on the wild streams. But man, you can see it. That's the nice thing about it, is you don't lose track of where your bugs are. And of course, you always want to have some atoms, right? So we like yellow, but gray is still an excellent go-to. And may go a little bit smaller, just depends on the situation. Black flies, elk hair caddis. Sam, that's your favorite bug.
Yes, sir.
I don't think I fish with you that you don't have an elk hair on at some point. And then that little polywing midge is an excellent brown and brook trout killer. I found that pattern. It's 50, 60 years old, found that pattern, I think in an Orvis book, and just fell in love with it. Love to fish it on brook trout, love to fish it on, not real strong when it comes to rainbows, but the browns and the brookies are going to eat that sucker up. And of course,
that's a good bug. You made a believer out of me on the Davidson River with that polywing midge.
A polywing midge, it'll catch some fish.
Yeah, the caddis though is one of my favorites. I mean, dry dropper rigs, I nearly always will have a caddis of some type up on top like that.
Yep.
You see them good, and the fish like to eat them.
They love them. Love them. And of course, some others, you should always have stimulators. You get some stone flies. That stimulator is a great pattern. It's a great point fly to drop off of. You can see it really well. Sometimes we've been up on the Watauga and stuff and had that stimulator just tear some fish up, right? It's a great all around bug. And of course, having a Royal Coachman or a Royal Wolf, Trude, not many people know of or fish a Trude. That's a Trude Wolf, I think, or a Trude Coachman pattern in Royal. And we also have it in lime. Great choice. Again, some days it's the lime and some days it's the red or the Royal. And of course, we like Prince nymphs. It's nothing for us to put a Prince nymph on and search some areas out. Yeah, spring to early fall, guys. You got to have some of the terrestrials. You got your Chernobyl. You got a beetle pattern, kind of a high vis with legs. Beetle pattern. That little stone fly in the bottom right is killer. Catches a lot of fish. And of course, one of the best bugs that I think that we fish with is that I don't even know what you call it, a little squirmy, but it's a chenille body, and boy, the wild trout just tear that sucker up. Especially, Sam, we were just up on Noontutla this last Friday.
Yeah.
And that little bug, that was the only thing they were taking. So
I'll tell you, there is no shame in fly fishing if you use a bug that ugly to catch fish with.
Hey, it looks like an inchworm,
It does.
Fish like inchworms. So
they were tearing it up. That's for sure.
That's a Kevin Howe pattern, Davidson River Outfitters. So that's
good early spring, early summer. These inchworms are crawling along on these, and they fall off in the creek, and these fish sitting there waiting for them.
Yeah, you really want to get, if you can bow and arrow, what you're going to have to do on some of these creeks. If you can get under those trees and do a little bow and arrow action, man, you're going to catch some fish for sure. Yeah.
Well, those are, I think, you mentioned earlier, all these flies are available, on our website, or, find a lot of them anywhere. But, if you want to see what we've got, you can go to our website and take a look at it.
Absolutely.
A little bit about tippet, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, you showed there on some of the creeks, man. It's crystal clear, and there's not going to be a lot of collusion coming into the water on these. So, usually 6X is what we're using for the most part, but real crystal clear, those smaller pools, you're going to have that 6.5 to 7X. And of course, if you're fishing smaller bugs, you better have that on. But I feel better with 6.5 for the, most of the time. If I'm having to get real technical, 7X, I start to wig out a little bit, but you got to have it. So don't be afraid to go with the halves with that trout hunter. It'll get you where it needs to be.
Yeah, and that it is small, but it's plenty hefty enough to handle
Strong.
the fish on
Very
Curtis
strong.
Creek.
Yeah,
Yeah, you're not going to have anything. You're not going to have anything on Curtis Creek that's going to give you a problem with that, other than maybe a few of the big pigs that they may put in the delayed harvest
Delayed, yeah.
area. But other than that, the mid and upper sections, this is more than enough to handle this fish.
Of course, there's all kinds of flies you can choose. Those are just kind of the flies that we play around with for the most part. We use a lot of perdigons, olive and purple perdigons. So there's all types of bugs. If you see it on our website, then, we're comfortable telling you that you're probably going to catch some fish with it. But those are some of the key highlights this time of year that we like to use.
Yeah. Chris, a lot of people want to know what we fish with. And we're bamboo guys. We've got graphite. Yeah. We've got fiberglass. We've got it all. But we like bamboo. Just remember, we make bamboo rods. Yeah. But we just like fishing with bamboo, especially on these small streams. Yeah. So a creek like Curtis Creek begs you to use a 6 or 6.5, 2 or 3 weight, or a 7 or 7.5, 3 or 4 weight. You can get along with any of those weights and do just fine. Yep. If you're a nympher type person or something like that, hey, knock yourself out with those 10 or 12 foot rods. You'll catch a ton of fish. But if you're going to fish traditionally with a fly rod, these are the sizes, and they work really well for us. People always say, well, who are the local outfitters? And in Black Mountain, which is about 10 miles away, is One Fly Outfitters right downtown. Good guys, know the lay of the land well on all the creeks and rivers around there. In Asheville, of course, you got Hunter Banks. Frank and his guys know the water really well too. Have a great selection of product. And in Hickory, you got Castor's Fly Shop. I know it's a little bit further away. And look, I know that they're probably I know that there are outfitters in Marion and places like that. I just don't know them. And Chris, we don't know them. We don't do business with them. Yeah. But I'm sure if you need someone closer than that, all these people sell my book, so obviously I know them, and that's the reason. That's the reason I list them. But they're good people.
So we had a good question.
People always.
Hey Sam, we had a good question from Gene, and he says, how would a Tenkara rod do on those small creeks? They do great. You're not really doing a lot of casting. You're doing a lot of lift in place or kind of bow and arrow, and so would definitely recommend
a lot of what we call dabbing too. We take our rods up, hold it up high. Yeah. Put X amount of line out, mostly tip it, and we're sticking them over rocks, kind of like what you're doing. We're just doing it with a shorter rod. Yeah. You've got an advantage if you're using a Tenkara. I would encourage you to take it. You'll enjoy it. You'll catch a lot of fish.
Get a lot of fun. Gonna get some action.
It'd be a lot of fun. Look, people always want to know some of the basic stuff of some of these watersheds. Where to stay, what to eat, things like that. For lodging, we recommend going back into Black Mountain, about 10 miles away. There's 2 places there, kind of from the penthouse to the outhouse. Starting with the outhouse would be the Apple Blossom Motel, other than if you stay in room 29, which has been newly redone, and you'd think you're in a Hampton Inn somewhere. It's pretty decent. Or the Monte Vista Hotel right down the place to stay. High end, but reasonable, $100, $110 a night kind of thing. But a really nice place to stay. Camping, I don't know why you'd want to stay anywhere else than Curtis Creek Campground, right there on the side of the creek. That's a great place to camp, easy to get to, and you're right. As far as food, Trailhead Restaurant in Black Mountain, or the Hillman Beer Old Fort in Old Fort is a good place to hang out for a good hamburger, good beer. Same thing with Black Mountain has a lot of restaurants, but Trailhead you'd probably like. If you're a brewery person like we are, Pisgah Brewing in Swannanoa is maybe 15 miles away, but Lookout Brewing in Black Mountain is about 10 miles away. If you want a couple of good breweries, those are pretty good places to hang out. If you're a cigar smoker, Europa in Black Mountain has a really good selection of cigars at a really good price. Or Pro Max Tobacco, just right down the street in Black Mountain, has a good selection of cigars. So that's kind of a rundown of where to stay, what to eat, things like that. Well, what happens if it rains on that side, on the south side of the parkway, and Curtis Creek is just blown out? Well, here's some suggestions. Drive up the Forest Service Road, cross over the Blue Ridge Parkway, and guess what? You're in the headwaters of the South Toe River. You can't beat that fishing all the way up from Black Mountain Campground or the country club down there up into the headwaters. A lot of tributaries and a lot of main run of the South Toe River gives you a totally different watershed, different weather system, where Curtis will be blown out, South Toe will be normal. Or if the South Toe is being blown out, Curtis will be normal. Mill Creek, which is just to the east of Old Fort, or to the west of Old Fort, up around Geyser, is a good creek. Flat Creek running through Black Mountain. The river really flows through Black Mountain, heads up at Ridgecrest. The headwaters, once I get down into Swannanoa proper on 70, I don't really go any further east toward Ash or any further west on the Swannanoa than there. From there, too much effluent, siltation, pollution. It's not maintained very well. But Carter Creek is up off the Parkway between Asheville and Mount Mitchell. A really good place to fish. And then, of course, if you want to go a little bit further, the Linville River in the gorge is a good place to fish. So whether Curtis Creek is fishable or not, when you get there, there's plenty of other places to fish. So, well, having said that, we've gone over a little bit here, but we wanted to, any other questions or anything, Chris, that we've got there?
No, we got Robert. He's already booked his campsite.
And I wanted to thank again our sponsors, Mojo Sportswear Company and the Country Network, who's hosting our TV show that we're doing. And we appreciate everyone joining us tonight. We hope we see you on the stream somewhere. And like the old saying goes, Chris, trout don't live in ugly places.
All right.